Kamala Harris has gained the support of more than a dozen mayors in Arizona. One of those supporters is the Republican mayor of Mesa, John Giles. Mayor Giles joins us now to explain his decision and why this lifelong Republican is publicly backing a Democrat. How you doing, Mayor?
Good to be with you, Tim.
Yeah, good to be with you as well. So what's the deal? What's going on here?
Well, this is not something that I take lightly. I take a lot of pride in trying to be as nonpartisan as I can. That's how I view the mayor's job, is to stay kind of in the middle of the field. And I work on a city council that's made up of progressive Democrats and conservative Republicans, and we get along very well. And I think we've accomplished some good things in Mesa because we focus on solving problems and we don't get involved in partisan issues whenever we can avoid it. So it's with a lot of reluctance that I dip my toe into partisan controversies, because that's polarizing. But I honestly think that I need to do this in my role as mayor, because I think I need to be an advocate for what's in the best interest of my city. And I think a second Trump presidency would not be good for my community.
Was there an incident, any one moment? Was there an aha moment, a light bulb that you just said, that's it, I can't take it anymore?
That happened a while back for me with President Trump. I think some of us have short memories. That a lot of us recall that 4 years as a national nightmare. The continuous governing by tweet, the continuous chaos and scandal. A while back, President Trump lost me. So
now, are you as much for Harris, or is it maybe even more against Trump? How does that balance work?
I have to admit there's a substantial amount of she's not Donald Trump, that goes into my calculation here. But I have to say that I have some genuine enthusiasm for Vice President Harris and also and Governor Walz. I think that, for example, the Vice President, I'm convinced that the top of her agenda is doing what's in the best interest of the United States. Certainly, as a Republican, I would differ with her on some policy points, but I don't question her good faith and I think she's evolved, frankly, as a candidate over the last her 4 years as vice president. I think now she and President Biden have done some things legislatively out of Congress. The CHIPS Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, that have really gotten a lot of bipartisan support, and they've been very beneficial to communities like Mesa.
What kind of policy points do you think you would disagree with her on?
Well, being a Republican, some of those core social issues, I don't endorse abortion on demand. There's a lot of folks in the Democratic Party that think that that's an absolute choice for women. At the border, I don't agree with an open border policy. I think but I think I blame, frankly, Donald Trump putting the kibosh on the bipartisan Immigration Reform Act that Senator Sinema accomplished on that.
Are you still a Republican?
I am.
Do Republicans still think you're a Republican?
Many, whether they think I am or not, I am, much to their chagrin. I have had a lot of feedback on social media suggesting that I ought to change parties.
Yeah. So what happened to the Republican Party? Jeff Flake has been on the show numerous times, and he compares it to a fever. And he said the fever will eventually break. He said that a few years ago, and the fever still seems to be going strong. Yeah. What has happened to your party?
It's been hijacked by the extreme right. That cohort was always there in the Republican Party, right? And it was always in the minority. But that clique of individuals has taken over and hijacked the party. And I don't know if Jeff Flake is right or not. I keep waiting for the pendulum to swing back to the middle, but there's so much money to be made in cable news and other outlets to continue to attract people to that far right and to use their algorithms to continue to program dopamine into people, to tell them what they want to hear. I don't know if it's ever coming back.
So many Republicans, though, that have not been happy with Trump, they don't turn into Democrats, they turn into independents.
Yeah.
Is that something that could happen to a John Giles?
Well, that thought has crossed my mind, but frankly, I think that it's important that people like me not do that. I think if there is going to be any hope for the Republican Party to get out of this downward spiral that it's in right now, it's that voices like mine have to continue to stay in the party and to voice our concerns. And so it might be a kamikaze mission, but I think it's something that I need to do.
Are you going to attend the event, Kamala Harris, the ticket tomorrow, the event in Glendale?
Yes, I was happy to accept that invitation.
And you're going to speak at that event?
I will have a speaking role, yes.
How about the Democratic National Convention? You going to go there?
I will also accept an invitation to the Democratic National
Listen to you, and you say you're still a Republican, right?
I know. It wasn't. That one was a little harder for me to think about why would I do that? What would my role be? But I've been convinced that there is a role for me to be there to support the Harris Walz campaign.
Last question: if Republican officials, National Convention officials, they say, "What's going on there in Mesa? We got to talk to this mayor and see." What would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
I would say let's go back to being the party. We need a big tent. If we want to continue to shrink the Republican Party tent, that is, again, going to be this downward spiral that's going to lead to it being irrelevant. And I don't think I'm some sort of genius, making that observation. That's clear. We need to broaden the Republican Party tent so that non-MAGA voices aren't told to get the hell out of the room.
Yeah.
And that, absent that type of a reform, that's not a bright future for the Republican Party.
Is that a future for the Republican Party? Is it possible? Is it viable?
It is, but I think Donald Trump used to say that we were going to get tired of winning. The opposite is what's happening in the Republican Party. So eventually, if Republicans get tired of losing, they're going to have to realize that they're going to have to broaden their perspective and not get rid of people like me.
Mesa Mayor John Giles. Mayor, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.